So thank you so much for joining me today, Andy. I'm Sophie Sparks. I'm the community manager here at the Information Lab, and it's fantastic to have the Zen Master Hall of Fame Makeover Monday extraordinaire, Andy Kriebel, with us. You have so many Tableau community accolades, I don't know where to start or finish. So hopefully everybody is familiar with Andy. So thanks, Andy, for joining me from a cafe in London, and I'm joining you guys from the Lake District in Northern England. So you've done lots and lots of live recordings of you doing Makeover Monday. And I thought this would be lots, then there are so many tips within each of those Makeover Mondays. So I thought we could do a quick highlights reel of some of your favorite 2021 Makeover Mondays, highlighting some of those tips. And Andy, and we could get a little bit of commentary from you about some of those tips. So we're going to look at those. So you've selected some of your favorite vizzes, Makeover Mondays from this year. Andy, did you have a favorite Makeover Monday?
Well, that's a good question. It's hard because they're all very different, and I approach each data set very differently. I like the ones where I learn something. So I've had a couple where I know I've built like a world trellis map, which was really fun because I had, or not, sorry, not a world trellis map, a world tile map, which was really fun to build because I'd never done it before. I also created one. Hex maps are always look really nice. I think one of the ones that looks most interesting is let's see which week this is. This is week 30. This is where we're looking at America's racial breakdown by state, and the original visualization was a tile map of the U.S. Pretty simple square for each state, but inside of each square was a tree map. And generally, tree maps aren't the best for showing proportions, but I wanted to learn how to build it. So it actually was very, very simple, which surprised me, but I guess that's good. But I actually thought it looked pretty good in the end, and I never thought I would say that about a tree map. So even though it's probably not the best way to communicate the data, I found it very fun to build.
And why do you do these
Yeah.
Watch Me Viz live events? What do you get out of them, and what do you hope the people who tune in will get out of them?
Well, I started them for a couple of reasons. One is it forces me to do it at a certain time every week. I know I need to get it done. So if I time box myself, I'll get it done. I try to keep it about an hour. It usually runs about an hour and 15 minutes or so because I end up building a lot more things than I probably typically would if I were doing it on my own, because I get comments from people during the during the live stream, and I might build something that they ask me for, or they might make a suggestion, and I'll run through some of those. And sometimes I just get other ideas, like I might know, for example, looking at a data set, that a line chart is going to be the best way to do it. But I have a whole list of about 40 or 50 different ways to visualize time.
Yeah.
So I'll go through as many of those as I can, as quick as I can in that, because then it's a way for people to learn how to visualize different ways, or different ways to visualize time, and it's going to become a really good resource for people. So yeah, I started it because I thought it might be useful to people. I thought it would be useful to me because I would be forced to do it at the same time every week.
Yep.
And that actually frees up a bit of my personal time, ironically. So, time boxing it into Monday afternoons, or Monday end of the day for us, I know that time every week is what I'm going to be is what I'm going to be doing, and it doesn't become a distraction on the weekends or during the rest of the week.
No, that's great advice, and it makes a lot of sense that it would be.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it at this time, it's going to work.
There's one other thing that some people have been doing each week now, which I really appreciate, is they'll watch the video and they'll tag every chart along the way and leave it as a comment. So people can just, click on that and it'll be like reviewed original visualization, built bar chart, built the line chart, built whatever, and they'll timestamp all of those and put it as a comment for everybody to read, which I think is like super nice of people to do. I wouldn't do it myself. I just can't be bothered, but I'm very appreciative when people take the time to do that kind of stuff for the community.
No, that is, and if there are any frequent timestamp taggers, Andy, I'll have a look back through the comments, and if you do watch this video, you should let Andy know who you are, so we can. I mean, he does know who you are, but you know, we can highlight those great good deeds as well. No, that is very helpful. Brilliant. So should we jump in and go through some of these vizzes and some great tips that you've shown during your Watch Me Viz live sessions? Let's jump in to start with viz types. So you use lots of different viz types, and actually you mentioned some in your intro as well. The tree tile map of the states. But one particular viz type I saw you make was a trellis chart, and in particular, you brought up a note on while you're building this visualization, which had a trellis chart calculation in it. So I want to ask, that looks like a fantastic tip that most people mightn't get, but do you have a repository of frequently used calculations that you use?
I do, yes. So I'm on a Mac, so I use notes on Mac, and I have a folder in there that I use for Tableau tips or whatever, and I create different ones in there. So I have ones for like trellis chart, for starburst chart. Like in an earlier summer, just a list of different chart types that you can build with time series, different things like that. Because I'm never going to remember the calculations, and I don't think it's necessary for me to remember the calculations when I can just copy and paste them. That particular type of visualization I find by Chris Love on the Information Labs blog, and it made a lot more sense once I read through that. And then I was able to kind of simplify it in my head and inside of my notes. So what you see in that video are the two calculations for the rows and the columns. But in my other notes, I have, okay, this is how you configure it along the way, so I don't mess it up every time, because there's a very distinct process you need to go through to make those work. And then I turn that into a tip video. So it's just 7 steps to create a trellis chart, I think is what I called it. But that content is going to be really useful for other people that need to build that type of visualization, but it's also very useful for me, so I can go back and look and remember how I did it before.
So perfect. So that sounds, yeah, that's a great thing to have. So people should maybe build their own frequently used calculation dictionary or chart, so they can jump in and out and make sure they have all the annotations to know the order in which they need to do things. Great. So if you keep on watching, you'll see Andy build the trellis chart, the tree in tile map chart.
So I think if we're going to create the tree map, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to just, for now, I'm just going to duplicate this data source. I'm going to show you, we're going to have to prep the data a bit. So I'm going to edit this secondary data source, and I'm going to call this pivot. I'm going to highlight the columns that have my my race, and then I'm going to choose pivot. And this will be my race. And then let's use percent of population. All right, now let's see if we can make this work now. So again, if I go to show me, I hardly ever use show me, but sometimes it's useful, because if I pick race and I pick percent of population, notice I can now create a tree map. So let's try that. And I'm going to put column in a column, row in the rows. And there we go. So we've recreated the tree map, which I think is a neat thing to do. Now, and if I now put this in full screen, you'll see we've got the original visualization rebuilt, which I think is kind of neat. I think it's sort of neat that we can do that. They're not perfectly square, so. And I want to put, let's say, year here. Okay, come on. And I just need to copy these two calculations, because these are what I'm going to use to create my trellis chart. Come on. And if you have a comment and then the calculation, you can just drag it over and it'll save the calculation. So I'm going to just drag that over and close that. And then I want both of these to be discrete. And put columns. We need to make year onto detail and area onto detail. Reverse those. Make this an attribute. And let's edit the table calc. So we want it to be by area and year at the level area. That's the columns. And then edit area, year at the level area. Okay, so now if I put the value, so I could probably put, if I do the share, okay, so I want this to be a line. Okay, so that didn't quite work out, did it? Let's see, make date. I'm just making a date field instead. And then create a custom date. I'm just going to call it my year. Tableau's giving me a range here of 0 to 2000, which I don't like, so that's what I'm changing here. So I'm going to put that there and put that here and make that an attribute. Okay, so now I just need to update my, it doesn't look like it likes the year as a date field. This needs to restart every area. There we go. Okay, there we go. So that looks better. And I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, let's add a maybe a 6-month moving average. So average, and I have to make the previous values 5. So you have to make the previous values 5 here because I have current value selected. So current, so 5 plus 1 is 6. And let's make that a combined axis view. Put that on color. Okay, so let's make this one red and maybe make this one, let's make this one black. Let's see what that looks like. And move that one up from the other. Okay, so I like using moving averages as well because it kind of smooths out the data, but also
Okay, Andy, up next, we've got some tips you show around formatting.
Okay, sorry, my internet connection cut out there. Can you repeat your question?
No problem, so that's all right. So we'll just start this whole formatting bit again. So Andy, formatting is very important. You actually spend a lot of time when you build any viz, formatting, from tweaking each individual viz as you make it to the final formatting of a dashboard. You probably spend about 1/3 of your time formatting. You show some great tips in coming up around using a color picker tool, using map layers as a way to format to make maps cleaner. But I've got a question around dashboard formatting. So you seem to use layout containers, either blank ones as placeholders, or you format them to make them look like dividing lines. How important is that for you to make a clean visualization? Is that necessary, or is it something that makes it easier just for you as you build?
As far as containers are concerned, I saw a video by Curtis Harris about how he uses layout containers, and it was like really eye-opening for me. And ever since I watched that video, I always start with a floating container around the outside of the visualization, and then I tile everything inside of that. And that kind of helps get rid of that mess that Tableau creates on the left-hand side. If you just like double-click on a chart and it sticks in the dashboard, you get like 12 layers of containers and stuff. And for me, that always made it really hard to find things in the dashboard. So I created a video around kind of how I use containers, and there's 2 pretty long videos about that. But then also anybody that watches Watch Me Viz during the week will see it as well. So we start with that outer container. And because I've built so many visualizations, I generally have a pretty good idea on how I want the dashboard to lay out. So almost always a title across the top. And then if the title needs to be separated from the visualization, that's when I'll put a blank object in there and then just format the background of it and shrink it up. And it makes it look like a nice clean divider line. And I use those to kind of section out the visualization. So sometimes I'll have a bunch of filters I want to have. So I'll I'll put a divider line maybe on the right-hand side and then have all the filters next to it in a container to try to keep the different parts of the visualization separate from each other. So yeah, I use those. I use blank containers a lot, both as those dividers, but also as placeholders while I'm building out the dashboard.
So I'm going to put state name onto the layers, and I'm going to move that to the back. And then I'm going to make this a filled map. And then let's make this a circle. And let's see, so I can't remember which way. Move down. Rename. Okay, so the state name, I'm going to just set this as just like some kind of, oops, no, I didn't want to do that. But I don't want it on color. I'm just going to put it on a detail. And then the color I'm going to maybe make like a light gray. The only reason I'm doing this is because I'm now going to get rid of the map background, so map layers. And I'm going to wash that out. So now I see just the state. And I can format the view to get rid of my row and column dividers. Okay, so I'm going to bring in a vertical container, and I'll start it as 800 by 600 or 1000 by 800 for now. So okay, and then I'm just going to drop a title in here. And then maybe I'll stick a blank. Okay, something like that. And then I'm going to put my bands across the top. So I'm just going to drag a blank in here just as a placeholder. And let me just, I'm going to shade that just so that I know it's my blank. Okay, so I'm going to bring in a horizontal container here. And this is going to have my bands. So 1, 2, 3. And then let's put another blank here. Which color did I use? Third one down. Oops. And this one should be 130. Okay, yeah, something like that. Okay, so I think that's better. If you have any feedback along the okay, got 2006, 2016. I'm going to also put the gender on detail and add that to color. And I'm going to switch these around. Okay, there we go. So now I can see all the men are one color, all the women are another.
Okay, Andy. So we're nearly at the end of this Viz, Watch Me Viz tips highlights reel. So the last 2 tips you pulled out as some of your favorite ones from 2021 so far are using ways to compare and highlight the difference in the comparison between 2 data points. So one way is to using a Gantt chart to show the length between, year 1 and year 2. And then another one is using different ways to highlight different types of differences. That's a terrible way to phrase that question. How important is it, do you think, to pull out these highlights as a separate visualization, for instance, as a Gantt chart line, opposed to just calling it out as a tooltip?
Well, when I create visualizations, because so much of what we do in the community is just done through Twitter, and it's through a picture that you post on Twitter. you can't assume that people are going to click through things. In fact, most people don't click through. So I think about it from that perspective is if I'm looking, if I want
Coffee.
to, yeah, if I want to communicate something, I need to communicate that through the picture. So if I hide it in the tooltip, people probably aren't going to see it. So that's kind of my default design when I'm doing something for Tableau Public, is to do my best to make everything that I want to communicate visible in that kind of picture. So in my head, I'm picturing it as a picture. Yeah, and then there's lots of different ways that you can do comparisons. So, if you look at, let's see, like week 23, you'll see that I have a bar chart that has 2 years, but then it has another bar that shows the difference between the 2 years. And I learned that one from Ellen Blackburn. She's got a great post on the Data School blog about how to build a chart like that, or maybe use like a diverging bar chart. That kind of maybe like a population pyramid type of thing. Those are really useful. But on those, I then try to make sure that the scale is the same on both sides. So you can see, it's always the middle of the chart is always, or sorry, the zero is always in the middle of the chart. And then depending on how far right or left it leans, you kind of see the bigger value. So there's tons of different ways to compare two data points. Maybe it's a slope graph, but when you do a slope graph, you probably want to highlight something. So think about, well, what's the story I'm trying to get out of this data? Let me highlight those particular lines in the slope graph. But I tend to use calculations to do them. And I do that because let's say I get new data and I want to update that chart. I don't want to have to go back in and manually change things again. I want the calculation to then kind of automatically change whatever it needs to. Like, let's say, I'm looking at Superstore and I'm comparing 2020 to 2021. If I get data for 2022, I want the chart to automatically switch between, to switch to be from 2021 to 2022. I don't want to have to go back in and manually highlight things or recalculate things. So you'll see during the Watch Me Viz that I create a lot of calculations, and I tend to create them step by step because I want to be able to reuse the parts. So, for example, if I'm doing a calculation that brings back current year sales, I might have one calculation that brings back the current year, and then another calculation that builds on top of that one, or maybe 5 or 6 that build on top of that one. But if I embed that current year calculation, if I just kind of take that formula and I put it inside of another field, I have to remember all the places that I've done that. So I try to think about, is this a calculation I'm going to reuse? If it is, I'm going to create it separately. So I end up with probably a lot more calculations than other people, but I also think that it's much more maintainable because, let's say my current year calculation is wrong, the one I have by itself. I have to change it in one place and then everything else updates. I don't have to remember the 20 other formulas that I used it in. So I try to think about that. And I don't really know how to teach people how to do that. Hopefully they learn that while they're watching and kind of how I do those sorts of things. And I try to explain that along the way as well while I'm doing the live sessions. But a lot of it just comes with experience. Really, any of this stuff just comes with experience. I can iterate through this stuff really quickly because I've been using Tableau for a really long time and I use it every day. I probably use it way more than anybody that watches, the videos. So hopefully it speeds up their development, but they also need to realize that they have to put the time in to get better.
So I've got the year, I've got the gender, and I've got the age range. Okay, so gender, age range. Said I have this one, age, range, gender. Okay, we can always move the fields around a bit. I don't want the year field on there, actually. I want to know the 2016 value, and I want to know the 2006 value. So I'm going to make those a dual axis, or sorry, combined axis so that I get my measure names and measure values. And let's go ahead and put measure names onto color. And what I want to do now is I want to add a third bar that shows the difference between the two. So to do that, I'm going to just duplicate my 2016 value, and I'm going to make that a dual axis and synchronize. And my measure value shelf, I'm going to make a bar. And then my other one, I'm going to make a Gantt bar. Okay, let me take measure names off of that one. And or I can leave it on there, it doesn't matter. And what I want to do here is I want to draw this bar. This should represent the length between the blue and the orange. So I need to create a new calculated field, and this would just be my change. So this is going to be 2006 minus 2016. And if I put that on the size shelf of that, you can see I now get that third bar going across there. Now I'm going to make this nice and thin to make it look a bit better. And then I'm going to go ahead and hide the header for those for that. So, okay, so, and then let me hide the header here. I don't need the copy field in my, yeah, so let me get rid of that in the tooltip. Okay, so now I've got 2006, 2016, and the change, okay, and all three of these fields need to be a percentage. Let's make those a percentage to 1 decimal. Okay, so that looks good. But I think maybe what I'll do this time is I'm going to put the male onto the detail shelf, and then I can add the male as a reference line. So for each cell, I'm going to have the male as a reference line, and maybe I'll make that a dark line. Hit OK, and now we can see where the male is, where the female responses are higher than the male responses. So I'm going to now create another calculated field because I want to color code the ones where the female is above the male. So female greater than male. And I'm just going to say sum of female is greater than, or I could just do female is greater than male. So sum of female, sum of male. And let's put that on color. There we go. So now we can see where the females are higher than the males.
Okay, thanks, Andy. So next little section of tips around calculations and sorting and dashboard actions. You've got a great, actually one of my favorite tips that I haven't really thought about why it works before, but using an integer to change a Boolean, a true false into a 1 or a 0, and to make that into a really quick percentage. I thought that was a fantastic tip, and I'm going to use that in my next visualization. But you also showed sorting. Now, sorting is something that trips a lot of people up, and the tip we're showing is a sort by multiple fields. Now, if you're just getting started with Tableau, sorting, the different types of sort can be different, confusing. Can you explain to people the difference between a multiple field sort and a nested sort?
Well, that's a good question. So sort means that, let's say we have 2 dimensions. We have category and then we have subcategory, and we want to sort by sales. I can first sort my categories, so then it's looking at the total sales for the category and ordering the categories that way. And then within those categories, I can sort the subcategories so that I have, you know, this nice little, I'm always going to have my largest category at the top, and then within each category, I'm going to have the largest subcategory at the top. So that's kind of like nested sorting. If you just do a sort just on subcategory, it's going to sort the subcategories, which is fine, but then your categories are going to be alphabetical. So it kind of depends on the situation the idea you're looking for. So, but it's also important that if you do that nested sorting, I think you need to make that clear to people why you did that, because they might expect the categories to be alphabetical. And then, I think when you see a bar chart and you see it descending, it's pretty clear. But if it's double sorted, like a nested sort, then I think you need to try to make that clear. It's hard to do, but it's something to consider when you're building the visualization, just for clarity and understanding.
Brilliant, thank you. So everyone keep on watching to see Andy doing a great multiple field sort, a Boolean integer tip, and some really good set actions and quick table calculation type things.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 calculated fields, one for 2006. And let's see, so what I want to do here is I'm going to do integer year equals 2006 times the never married. So this is going to say if the year is 2006, then it's going to return a true or a T. When I put an integer around that, it's going to turn the true into a 1 and the 0 and the false into a 0. Multiply that by the never married, and now we have the percentage for 2006. And if we sort that, the problem now is we could have multiple schools with the same name. So I'm going to put the OPE ID here, and then I want to sort this by descending by the field dollars per recipient. Okay, so I'm doing that just in case the two universities have the same name, and then I'll just uncheck show header there. And so let's create a little timeline. I'm just going to make these circles. Actually, I'm just going to make it a line. Okay, and I'm going to create a set. And okay, month set, that's fine. Let me just pick a bunch of dates. It'll work. So ultimately, I want the user to be able to, so let's add an action. And let's call it change set values. So update months set. And assign values to set. Keep set values. Okay, oops, I need to tell it what set to update though. And the set is month set. Okay, so if I lasso a bunch of these points here, those are going to now be in my set. So if I show the show members, I can see it goes from November 2007 to May 2009, which is probably what I picked here. Okay, good. So, so this would be my date picker. Month set values, and if month set, then month. And I'm going to put that onto detail. That's annoying. So I want this to be month. And now I'm going to add in, let's see, so I want to get the min month in set. So, so I want to say, month set values. And then I want to duplicate that and now get the maximum. I'm doing this because I want to put little dots in the view at the top that show me kind of where the min and the max are. So if I now put both of these into the view, let's make these month. Okay, get rid of that one. So maybe an easy way to do it would be to put a reference band across the table. And I want to go from the min month to the max month. And I'm going to maybe put some lines on there. And I'm going to turn off all the labels to make it look a bit better. Oops, none, none. Okay, so now we can see the date range that we picked. So if I pick a different date range here, it'll shift that. Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Andy, and everyone who is watching this video. If you'd like to see more of these highlights reels, let us know in the comments and we'll hopefully think about making some more. And lastly, Andy, you've mentioned a lot of extra resources, so everyone check out the links in the description below. So I've linked to every Makeover Monday Andy's mentioned, but also try and link to all the resources, extra resources Andy has mentioned in this chat as well. So do check the comments out. So thank you so much for joining us, Andy, and I hope you have a good coffee. It sounds like they're making some for you just then.
Yeah, they are. Great. Thank you, Sophie.
Thanks. Bye.